Welcome to this 12th episode of the Thriving Church Podcast. I'm Kevin Parker, and I'll be your host for this conversation. And in the next few minutes, we're going to talk together about how your church can be stronger, healthier, reach people, and build spiritual champions who live out God's kingdom across New Mexico and around the world. We hope you've listened to each episode, but if you're new with us or just want to catch up, every episode is available on our podcast site, thrivingchurchpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So we're going to get started here, and we've got somebody in the studio with us and remotely. I'm really excited about the content we have for today. So here in the studio, we have Katy. She's our NextGen and Women's Ministry Specialist. But what is your actual title, Katy?
I think it's pretty close. I think it's NextGen and Women's Ministry Strategist.
Strategist.
The official word, yeah.
So she's strategic, not just special.
That's right.
That's great. That's great. So we also have remotely with us from Cloudcroft, New Mexico, Larry Evans, who is the pastorate, and your church has just changed its name. It's Summit Church.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Summit Christian Fellowship, technically.
Okay,
but,
Summit Christian Fellowship used to be the old First Baptist Church of Cloudcroft. For those guys who don't know, the change has happened. But he's with us, and we're going to be talking today about reaching children. And that's a huge topic, and we've got lots to talk about. And guys, I'm just thankful. Thank you for being on the podcast with us. So Katy, why is reaching children important for a thriving church?
Well, I think that we have seen that post-COVID more than anything. It's important because children aren't just the future of the church, they are the church now. A church that does not have the next generation honestly running wild in the church, right, is a sign of a church that is not in a good place because they don't have anybody that is coming up. A lot of our churches, we can see where it is just the older generation that's there. And thank God for those seasoned saints that are there. But eventually those people are going to pass away. And if there's not a younger generation that is there to continue the work of the church in that community, that church is literally going to die. So we need the next generation. We need to raise up the next generation for the sake of that church, for that community, and for the mission that God has called the church to. We need to be investing and valuing the next generation of disciples and disciple makers.
So before we got into this recording session for this episode, you and I were talking about how children's ministry is not just about the children. And I think what you just said kind of touches on that because children's ministry is much bigger than the children. Mm-hmm. It's important to the church. And while you were talking all about that, I started thinking about and the community, and then you said in the community, because it stretches out. It stretches out beyond the church, mm-hmm. and it kind of has waves of influence. And sometimes I think it's easy for the church to have a mindset that children's ministry is a lot of work. It's messy. They make noise and they're trouble. And it's just a lot of effort. Mm-hmm. But it's essential, and it's so important. So we've got Larry here today, and we want to draw him in on this conversation. So I asked you to invite a guest. And you decided on Larry. So tell me about Larry. Connect Larry with children's ministry. He's a pastor. He's not a children's pastor. He is the pastor of his church. Connect us with Larry and draw him in here.
Yeah, so one of the folks that came to mind, there are a number of folks in this state who I think have a well-rounded view of children's ministry and reaching and engaging families in their community. But one of them is Larry. Larry and his wife, Cynthia, both work with me a lot in my training events and camps and a lot of different things that we have going on in the state. And so not only do I feel like Larry and Cynthia have a great ministry where they're really reaching and engaging their community in Cloudcroft. But they've also worked with a lot of our churches in the state. So they actually have, probably as good as anybody, a good perspective of the different communities of churches that we have in BC&M. So I thought that he would have a great perspective and great insight. And so, Larry, you want to share a little bit about who you guys are and what you're doing in Cloudcroft?
Sure. A little bit about my background. I began when I was in college in student ministry. Of course, back in those days, we called them youth ministers. So I was youth minister for a couple of years when I was in college, went to, when I was in seminary, another church. And at that church, it was funny, in the interview, they asked me, would you be willing to work with children also? I had already been working with children some. And so I said, of course. And so they voted on me, and they voted me in as the minister to youth and children. So I was the youth and children's minister there in the Fort Worth area. So I've always had a love for kids. I became an uncle at 8 years old, and you know from experience, Katie, I am that uncle, you know, the one that would chase the kids around and get them all hyped up and in trouble. So I have always loved working
Larry,
with students.
are you the one who gets them to run down the halls at the church?
I'm the one that's chasing them usually, and so I'm smart enough to know that I need to be walking when I come into the room so I don't also get in trouble. So I've always had that, and so just carried that on over into our ministry at the church that I was at prior, and then here. So we understand that it's vitally important for churches to be able to reach out into kids and children and students. So we've been doing that. When we first came, my daughters were 10 and 2. And they didn't have anyone in the nursery, so that kind of let you know where they were going. They knew for sure they were going to have a 2-year-old, and there wasn't anyone in the nursery, so we began working on that. Our church thought that our family, or our community was primarily retired folks. This is a kind of a retirement resort. It's changed over the years now. And so they didn't realize what I found out the first time I dropped my then 4th grader off to school is that there are a lot of kids in this town, and that was 22 years ago. So we began to reach out and to make some of those small changes even back then, and not all of them have been easy. Kevin, as you were describing children's ministry, it's messy, it's noisy. Did you say the kids were trouble? Or it's probably because of people like me. But it is. And so, Katie, we were talking before we came on. I had someone from another church. They put together a committee, and the youngest person on the committee was 60 years old. And she said, how are you guys reaching kids? And I said, well, it's really simple. And she said, oh, good. I said, well, simple isn't easy. There's some things you have to know. First of all, your worship service needs to be family friendly. And she said, what do you mean by that? She said, we only sing hymns, that's not going to work. I said, well, it doesn't really matter the songs. But when people bring kids into the service, they need to feel wanted and welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about there needs to be some kind of culture there that even touches the worship service and the atmosphere there.
When they come in, when their kid is fidgety, and kids are,
right.
Katie, you've got good kiddos, but I bet you they don't sit like little statues in church. They wiggle, they squirm, they ask questions. We have little kids worship bulletins and some packets for them. You guys may have the same, but still, there's noise when there are kids. They're fidgety. They might have to get up and go to the bathroom, no matter how many times you told them to go before the service. and so there needs to be that atmosphere in your church that kids are wanted and welcome. Mm-hmm. What they need is for our seasoned saints. By the way, I'm finding myself more and more to be the oldest person in the room in circumstances, which is really disconcerting for me because I'm not that way in my head. But the gray-haired people, and I am one, the hair on my face anyways is gray. I'm bald, if you don't know, guys. The
Yeah, this
gray-haired
is a
people.
podcast, so nobody can see you.
I forget. So when I turn to the mom who brought her two kids without dad, that happens a lot, and the kids are fidgeting, what they need to see is a grandfatherly kind of smile on my face. They need to know, you know, that I'm wanted, I'm welcome. So that's a big thing. The other one is you have to have kids programs before you have kids. And I know that sounds backwards, but you got to think about the young mom who's bringing her 4-year-old and 2-year-old into church, or maybe the young family, mom and dad with a 4-year-old and 2-year-old, and there's nothing for their kids. They're probably going to go find a church that has something. We tend to wait until we get a group of kids and then we have a program for them. But you have to have people who are committed to show up, prepare. If Sunday morning is what you have for your children's ministry, to show up prepared month after month before you have a kid. And that's hard. It's not complicated.
So explain a little bit about really what that looks like for a church. Because we were talking just a few moments ago before we started the podcast about a church who's talking about being ready for kids because they don't have any kids right now, and they know they need to be ready. But what does that look like? Are we talking just a person who studied a story? Are we talking about having a room set up? What all are we talking about being ready for? What does that look like?
I would say the first step in that, I came from the Dallas-Fort Worth area long ago. And at the church that I was at, all the pastoral staff, there were 5 of us, we went to a Barna conference, which is really fun if you ever get to go to something like that. And we were all encouraged, except for the senior pastor. We were all encouraged when we left, and he just looked so down in the dumps. And on the way back, we said, what's going on? And he said, all I heard all weekend long was, if the pastor ain't selling, ain't nobody buying. And we said, what do you mean? He goes, I was hoping that you guys could champion all the programs for the church, that you guys could be the ones who promoted and got people on board. And he said, what I found out was, and this was a large church, 5 on pastoral staff. He said, what I found out was I'm the one that has to convince everybody that it's worth it. So pastors, here's what I would say. The number one step is you have to understand, you have to have a heart and a passion for reaching young families with kids. Now, in your community, we haven't even gotten into the whole community aspect. So first of all, the pastor has to buy into it. So Kevin, I say that's first because every church has to kind of start where they are. So maybe if you have no kids programs at all in your church, maybe you start with a nursery. That's actually, I think, probably the biggest need for a young family to come if they've got a little 2-year-old. 2-year-olds are kind of hard to keep occupied in the service for a while. No matter how good the pastor is, no matter how great the singing is, a 2-year-old is going to be hard to keep occupied. So maybe the nursery would be the first one. And you're just going to have people that set up the room every week. I would say, Katie, we know this in children's ministry, that word childcare, that's a bad word.
It's a bad word.
In ministry. We don't do childcare. We teach them. So have a program. We use Hi-Fi, which is a Lifeway curriculum. And Hi-Fi has even stuff for the babies. You think babies can't learn? You better start teaching them right away because they can. And so have a curriculum, have the room set up, be ready to go at least 15 minutes before the service starts. Have some training, meet the parents at the door, have something, you have the separation anxiety a lot with 2-year-olds. Lifeway also puts out a levels of biblical learning that's really good. They have it in chart form. They also have a book and pamphlet. But teach them, train them. Don't just throw them to the wolves. Not that 2-year-olds are wolves, but so I would start with nursery. and then I would go on a Sunday morning. We do a pre-KK program. Once they move on, and every church I have to kind of decide where they're going to promote them. You have to do it age stage appropriate to promote them up. So that's what we do on Sunday mornings is nursery and pre-KK. I say that, and then we added. Cynthia got the idea from someone else. Bible buddies. So Bible buddies is grades 1 through 4, where they work on Bible skills. But we didn't start there. Start with the nursery. So that's what I mean, Kevin. And you have to have somebody. And man, that's hard, isn't it? It's to convince somebody. You're going to have to prepare a lesson. Now, Hi-Fi makes it easy. I don't work for Lifeway. I don't even get a discount. But
we'll put in a good word for you.
Thank you. Thanks. But it makes it easier because it's a fairly low prep, but you still need to do some prep and be ready and be that smiling face when they bring them.
So you're talking about actually having the room set up and not waiting until somebody shows up to the door, and then people who you've enlisted to do this run to the room. But you have them go ahead, even though there's nobody there and there wasn't anybody there last week. You have them go wait in the room, and then when the service starts, if there's nobody there and nobody's come, they come into the service or whatever, or go to Bible study, whatever the arrangement is. But you have them go to that room like you're expecting the children to show up at the door, just like it's normal. That's what you're talking about.
Yep. And families with young kids don't show up on time. So I would probably say wait until 20 after the service starts. 20 minutes after the service starts. Hey, you guys know what it's like. Mm-hmm. Good grief. You're trying to get your kids can be perfect all week long. And then on Sunday mornings, you try to get them ready. And the kids are fussy and crying. They're fighting, even if they're 8 years apart, like Iris were. Our 10-year-old was arguing with a 2-year-old. I don't know what she thought she was going to accomplish, but she did that. Even the dogs and cats are acting up. Your car, all those things happen. So they could come 20 minutes late, easy. So I'd have them wait 20 minutes. But it's a big commitment. I understand that, but it takes a big commitment. We're just 1 or 2 generations away from losing our church.
Right. And there are kids everywhere. I mean, there are children absolutely everywhere. If you live in a place that has an elementary school, that needs to be a cue to you. You may look around at your church, and I think there's a lot of churches that do this. They look around at their church and say, there's no kids in our church. Yeah. But you need to look around at the community. And if you see an elementary school, I don't know how to say it easier. If you see an elementary school, that should tell you something.
Well, and I think, when you're talking about being ready, like being on board, being ready, being there, I think forming the why. Why am I doing that? Why do I care? We care because we want to immediately communicate with parents and families that there is a place for you here. We want to, in the worship service, to make families feel like I'm welcome here. We're trying to, they automatically feel like they're an outsider when they walk through the doors because it's unfamiliar. They don't know anybody. They don't know where to sit, where to stand, where the bathrooms are. So they automatically feel like an outsider. And if we're shaping the culture of our church to make outsiders feel like insiders, we're thinking from the mind of a mom or a dad who's bringing their kids, who is squirmy, who is fidgety, we're afraid that people are going to think that they're too much of a burden. And we don't want them to feel like that at the church. We want the church to feel like home. We want it to feel comfortable, and we have to work hard to build that for them. And so we're building that, like Larry, what you're talking about in the worship service, where it's not a burden because I'm looking at them like an aunt or a grandparent that loves this kid and wants them to be here because this is where they need to be. They need to be at the feet of Jesus. And I'm going to be ready for them to show up because I want them to be at nursery, or I want them to be in the kids class, because that's where they're going to hear about Jesus. That's where I'm going to communicate that and love that for them. So when we think about that within the context of the church, we're working really hard to create this environment. And kids ministry is hard work. Like, I'd never sugarcoat that. It is hard work, but it's worth it. Right? Mm-hmm. It is worth it. It's what God has called us to do, to invest in making disciples, right? And so we care a lot about that. And so we are willing to put in that work because we know that is worth it. And those, every single child that walks through those doors, and their parents and their grandparents, it is worth it in the kingdom of God for them to be a part of the family of God. And so we are working hard to create an environment where they feel welcome, and we're easing that transition from outsider to insider.
So we need to unpack a little bit, I think, a little bit more this why. But before we do that, we need to take a break for just a second for our 30 seconds of hope with Hope Evans, which I guess we need to do a disclaimer here and let everybody know. Hope is also live with us here with from Cloudcroft, and it just so happens Larry is Hope's father. But we have separated them. They're in different rooms. But Hope has some information to share with us about events and activities that are designed to help churches, and we want you to hear about this. And so, Hope, jump in.
Hi, everyone. Coming up this week, there is a disaster relief celebration and training happening on April 9th through the 11th at First Baptist Church Ruidoso. Also, there is a vacation Bible school training happening at Calvary Baptist Church in Las Cruces on April 11th from 9 a.m. to noon. Also, early registration is open for stew camps and kids camps. So you can go to bcnm.com/camps to register. And that's all the time we have for 30 Seconds of Hope.
Hope, thank you so much. And for you who are listening, information about all of those events and activities that she described is available on the podcast site at thrivingchurchpodcast.com. Just click on events, and we put links there to give you information about all of those. So, of course, we want you to mark your calendar and make preparations to attend. So take advantage of those things. Back to our conversation with Katy and Larry. You know, it's always interesting to see how these conversations kind of develop. And we've talked about some practical things and all that, but this why. Katy, you started to go into this. Why do you need to have a children's ministry? Obviously, if there are children in your community, you want to reach them. I mean, that's a no-brainer. But children's ministry has tentacles of influence, if we call it that go out into a bunch of other areas. So we just started talking about how children's ministry, though we want to share the Bible stories with them and teach them, and if they're old enough, begin talking with them about the gospel in age-appropriate ways. We want to do that with kids because that matters. But we started talking about how it matters to the parents and them being able to have the opportunity to come to church and to listen. And it's not that we want to fan something about that they want to get away from their kids or anything like that, because it's not what it's about. It's about giving them an opportunity to be able to pay attention, to take a few distractions away, so that they can have the impact of everything we do felt in their life. Talk a little bit about what are some other pieces of the why. Why we do it. It's not just the presence of children. There's kingdom impacts here that we know God wants. There's other people. Expand on that. Why is this so important?
Yeah.
Can I jump in?
Absolutely.
I did. I'm sorry. That's just me. Cynthia and I have had a saying for a long time, and we know this as parents, and now for those of you who might not know, new grandparents. Obadiah turns 1 tomorrow. Just have to throw that in. If we were video, I'd throw a picture in for you. But anyhow, Here's the saying that we've had that guides what we do for children's ministry. If you love my kids, you love me. It really opens doors for ministries to family.
So you're saying
Absolutely.
something. You're saying something to a whole family with children's ministry. That's powerful.
And I wholeheartedly agree. I remember years ago, before I had kids, talking to my sister who had kids before me, her making a similar statement. You love my kids, you love me. And now that I have kids, I feel that, right? The people who love and invest in my kids have a very special place in my heart, right? They have a sphere of influence in my life because of how much they love and care for my kids. And so there is this emotional tie-in with families if we can love and care for their kids well. And we care about reaching the kids individually because their soul matters. Their soul matters in the kingdom of God. Themselves uniquely matters to God. But it also matters to reach their whole family, right? Because we want this to be, one, if that child becomes a believer, if they are in a family of believers, the longevity of their faith and their walk with the Lord, the fruitfulness of that, it is going to be exponentially different. The odds are exponentially different for that if they're in a family of believers versus if they're not. But also, it matters to that kid that their parents are going to know Jesus and to be in heaven with them forever, right? That matters to that child, not just for their personal walk, but because the people they care the most about are going to be their parents and their siblings and their grandparents. So that matters to them. But it matters in the big picture of, we don't want it to just be one child in a community. We want a whole community to come to know Christ. We are shaping our ministries to think much more largely about the kingdom impact. And so we want this to be not just about a ministry building so that we have more kids in the door so we have a bigger kids ministry, but because we are working towards the kingdom of God. And if we're working towards the kingdom of God, then we care about not just reaching that one child, but this being something that bleeds into the whole community, and so that the gospel is being proclaimed and going forth, and that we're making disciples, right? We want that reproducibility of the gospel and of discipleship and of we want it to be exponentially beyond that one child. And so there should be a holistic approach to our children's ministry, how we see kids in our church, to be about reaching whole families and whole communities beyond just the child that's sitting in those kids' rooms and those tiny chairs.
So this is just big. I mean, I'm listening to you guys, and obviously for a church, this is the next generation. This is its future. Okay, so if they don't have children and young families, when the current people die, the building goes vacant. So this is their future. So it matters to the church. It matters to the children because they need hope and purpose in life. They need everything that the church and the gospel and everything is going to deliver to them throughout the years. They need that. They need a place. They need acceptance. They need all of those things, and we're delivering that. We're delivering something to the parents. This just snowballs. So when we talk about kids ministry, this is major. And so we've talked about some starting places of where to begin. What are a couple of other really important pieces we need to have in mind with children's ministry? We talked about the starting point. We've talked about the why. And what are some other things that we need to do? What about, there's a lot of talk about safety.
Yeah.
How does that, where is that in the whole thing?
Yeah. So we value, the church should be the safest place for the most vulnerable, right? That I will beat that drum. I will say that until I'm blue in the face, right? Like
And we need to. Yes.
The church should be the safest place for the most vulnerable, which means that we do care about those things. We do care about safety from outsiders, but we also, when we have a healthy understanding of the depravity of man, of sin, we understand that there are people in our church who are very, very broken. And so we want to make sure that the people who have access to the most vulnerable are the most vetted. Everybody is on high alert to make sure that they are doing everything as safe as they can, and that we're doing everything to guard and protect that. And that whenever there is any kind of, I could talk about this for hours, but whenever there's any kind of allegations or any of those things, that we are caring first for the victims, and that honors and glorifies God and his church when we care well for those who have been hurt, and those who have been victimized and those who have been abused. And that is not an easy thing. That takes a lot of work, and it is very tricky. There's a lot of complicating things that are in that. But we work hard to make sure that this is a safe place, because we don't want that to be a hurdle for the gospel. We don't want that to be the stumbling block for people to know who God is. You know, wiser people than me have said, when a child experiences abuse in the church or from a leader in the church, that communicates something to them about who God is. And we don't want that to be what they have in their mind, what they form this idea of who God is based off of abuse, based off of hurt.
Right. And so we probably need to have another episode, Katy, and just unpack all of that. We could do the whole thing. I need to add that to my list. Well, I think we've got safety that's dealing with people like that. I think there's also the piece of safety, just you need to have a safe location and setting, all of the physical stuff about the room. So we probably need to be careful about, if we're starting up a children's ministry, having them, a bunch of people say, you know, well, hey, I've got this stuff out in my garage that I used with my children 25 years ago. I could donate that to the church. We probably need to go to a little more effort and make sure that we're really meeting safety standards that we know about today that we didn't know about 25 years ago. And make sure everything's appropriate and have all that on hand. And for the people who are listening, that's why we have Katy. She can answer all kinds of questions for all of our churches about where to find information about those kinds of things, about all these safety issues. And so you need to take advantage of learning about that. Is there anything else, Larry? You look like you had one more thing.
Oh, I have 3 pages, but I won't go into that. One of the things, Katy is an excellent resource because she's connected with other state NextGen people from across our country. But you know, nowadays, I was just going to say, and then I looked at Katy and realized that she is one. You grab a millennial mom with young kids and ask them to come and look through your nursery. Because they've probably done the research for their kids. Ask them to help you safety proof your nursery. And probably that old metal rusty Tonka truck shouldn't be there. I don't know. You know,
there's so many pieces. I mean, okay, Larry, I'm on the same journey with grandkids. And we've had to learn that, back in my day, a car seat was a car seat. Katy's laughing. That is no longer the truth. And car seats actually have expiration dates and they age out and all of this kind of stuff. And that same kind of commitment, if we're going to do children's ministry as a church, we need to be ready to just jump in And we need to talk about that. Yeah. And that's the point of this podcast, is to get people thinking about it and thinking about where they need to go. Guys, we're out of time. And so we're going to have to wrap up. Larry, we reserve the right to call you back. we probably need to find the rest of those pages of notes and everything that you have. But guys, I want to thank you at home, in your office, on the track, walking, wherever you are listening to us. Thank you for being with us and letting us into this space and time with you as we've explored what it means to be a thriving church. Myself, Katie, and the rest of our convention's missionary staff are available to answer your questions and to help your church thrive. And so if you need to contact us, just visit thrivingchurchpodcast.com and click on contact. We talked about some resources today. Larry mentioned some things. We're going to try and locate those and get links and everything to them and put them on the podcast site. Again, that's thrivingchurchpodcast.com. You can click on resources and find those. Until our next episode, remember that our mission is God's mission, and our power is His power, and it just doesn't get any better than that. We hope you have a great Sunday this week. I'm Kevin Parker, and we'll see you next time on the Thriving Church Podcast.